Avengers Endgame was the perfect way to wrap up the MCU. Even bookending Robert Downey Jr.'s line, "I am Iron Man," from the first movie. It's an exciting, fun film, wrapping up story threads from 23 different movies, while at the same time allowing us to revisit some of those movies from a different perspective. Much like Spider-Man No Way Home, Avengers Endgame uses nostalgia as part of the narrative. But unlike No Way Home, the nostalgia that Endgame uses, it's from its own story. So it fits easily into the narrative and universe that Endgame resides in. No Way Home had to pull nostalgia from the multiverse, mixing 3 different universes and complicating continuity, as opposed to Endgame that pulled nostalgia from its own past to make a more complete story. In my own opinion, there are only 2 problems with Avengers Endgame. The first being that this is too much movie. Sitting down to watch Avengers Endgame is like starting a hike up a tall mountain. You pretty much know what to expect, and you pretty much know how it's gonna end. And you know you're gonna enjoy yourself. But you also know it's a long trek that's gonna take a lot out of you, which makes taking that first step hard. I can enjoy any scene from this movie at any time. Well, maybe not any scene. But to sit down and watch this movie takes planning. The best part of Avengers Endgame is how it brings everything full circle. The movie just doesn't make references to the past. It brings validity and in some cases closure to those references. And I'm not just talking about taking us back to the Battle of New York or Asgard during the Dark World or to the beginning of Guardians of the Galaxy. On top of that, we've got all the through lines. The lines that are constantly repeated throughout the whole MCU. Lines like "I could do this all day" and "on your left." And like I said earlier, Endgame bookends individual story arcs by taking a classic line from their first movie and repeating it in this one. For example, in the original Iron Man admits to the world that he is Iron Man. And with great conviction, right before he makes his sacrifice in this movie, he declares once again that he's Iron Man. Another example, in Captain America the First Avenger, when Bucky's going off to war. Bucky says, "Don't do anything stupid." And Cap says back to him, "How can I? You're taking all the stupid with you." A great line for sure. And in Endgame, Bucky throws it back at Captain America as he goes to return the Infinity Stones. Thanos even gets a call back to his origin movie, Infinity War, when he says you should have gone for the head. And in Endgame, Thor chops his head off and then says, "There, I went for the head." But those aren't the only callbacks. We get to see the kid from Iron Man 3 again. Spider-Man gets to use instant kill, something he found out about back in Spider-Man Homecoming. But these are my favorite callbacks. In the original Avengers movie, Steve Rogers accuses Tony Stark of being a selfish man, not willing to make the sacrifice play. And Tony accuses Steve of being nothing special, that he's just a lab rat. But in Endgame, both accusations were proven wrong, as Steve Rogers was able to lift Mjolnir, which proves everything special about him comes from inside. And Tony does make the sacrifice play for the whole universe. But my real favorites are the small lines. In Captain America Civil War, Clint goes up to Black Panther and says, "We haven't met. I'm Clint." And Black Panther says, "I don't care." In Endgame, Black Panther calls out Hawkeye's name, proving that he did care, and he remembered. And in Ant-Man and the Wasp, Hope makes fun of Scott for calling Captain America Cap, like he's part of the team. And in this movie, Wasp calls Captain America Cap, proving that she's part of the team. It's little touches like this that makes Avengers Endgame the perfect ending to this series of films. Now, I told you there were two major problems in this movie. And I already gave you one, that this movie is too much movie. Well, while making this video, I remembered a third. So here are the other two. The good news is, the Russo brothers only used Captain Marvel at the beginning and end of the movie. For the vast majority of the movie, she's missing. Why, you may ask? Well, there's two reasons for that. One of those reasons being, this movie is a farewell to the original Avengers, with some of them dying. A couple that will only stick around to promote their replacements. And one whose public character assassination was so brutal that even if he's in further movies, he's not the same person. And speaking of Thor, the other reason Brie Larson isn't in this movie very much is the same reason they made Thor fat. When you have a character that can just fly through an armored spaceship and overpower the main bad guy, there's no need for all the other superheroes to be there. Unfortunately, there are scenes with her in this movie, and she's still the same smug, condescending bitch she was in her solo film. And now it's time to talk about the worst part of this movie. The scene that made me, after 2.5 hours of being completely invested, want to get up and walk out of the theater. We finally get to the final battle, where thousands of beings are fighting to the death. And somehow, in the middle of all this carnage, every Avenger with a vagina shows up in the same spot to back up Captain Marvel. Who doesn't need their help? It's a real girl power moment, and it's completely unnecessary. First of all, did they plan this ahead of time? Half of them just got snapped back into existence. So there's no way they would have planned this before. So unless during the battle, all the girls were chit-chatting about getting together. This makes no sense. What's even more unnecessary about this scene is each and every individual female character already had their own spotlight during this battle. We already know what badasses these women are. The only thing that this scene confirmed was that women in the Avengers all have the same superpower, to find other women on battlefields. A power demonstrated in Infinity War as well. So there you go, another throwback. Alright, here's the thing. I know I said there were only 2 problems, and then I said there were 3, and now I'm gonna throw in a 4th. Well, I apologize. These videos are fluid, and there's no way I'm going back and re-recording the whole thing. But here's what doesn't make sense. Why on earth would our heroes, who consist of the biggest geniuses and military minds on the planet, decide to play football with the Infinity Gauntlet in the middle of the biggest battle in history? It makes absolutely no sense. Captain America had the right idea. As soon as he found out the Infinity Gauntlet was on the battlefield, he told them to get it as far away as possible. And then along comes quote-unquote smart Hulk, who says they have to return the Infinity Stones now, in the middle of this battle, even though afterwards they'll have all the time in the world. So the plan is to use Scott's van, which is completely intact somehow, even though everything around it is rubble. They're gonna use the time machine in the back of Scott's van, and then, yada yada yada, Thanos gets the Infinity Gauntlet. I've got the plan for you, Captain America. Why don't you shrink the Infinity Gauntlet, give it to Ant-Man and the Wasp, and have them fly away with it? With them being so small, they'll never get caught. and you deal with returning the stones later. After you stop the madman that wants to use the stones to kill the universe. But Mr. Lot, Doctor Strange said there's only one way they could win, and if they did it your way, then they wouldn't win. That's very true, but none of our heroes know what the one way to win is. They're making their plans based on the information they have in front of them. And Cap's initial instincts were correct. They need to get that gauntlet as far away as possible, not sit and have a science experiment. Remember, the goal is to stop Thanos from doing this. Alright, I lied to you. There's more than a few problems with this movie. But the genius isn't in its perfection. The genius is in how it said farewell to our favorite characters and closed this chapter of the MCU.